Welcome back to Speak English Like a Pro. So glad you're here today because we're about to dive into a topic that I know resonates with so many of you. You've studied English for years, perhaps gone through countless textbooks, aced your grammar tests, and you can probably articulate complex ideas in a formal setting. But then you step out into the real world and suddenly it's different, isn't it? Conversations flow in ways you didn't expect. Words are strung together in unfamiliar patterns, and you hear phrases that never quite made it into your curriculum. That feeling, that moment when you realize there's a whole layer of English, the informal, the nuanced, the utterly practical, real life English that you might have never truly learned in a classroom. Well, my friends, you are absolutely not alone. In fact, that's precisely what we're going to tackle today. How to master that authentic, everyday English that makes you sound less like a textbook and more like a native speaker. You see, the truth is, language is a living, breathing thing. It evolves, it adapts, and it has a rhythm that sometimes traditional learning methods don't fully capture. We often learn the correct way to say things, which is crucial, don't get me wrong. But then we encounter conversations where people are cutting words, using idioms, slang, phrasal verbs, and subtle intonations that convey more than just the literal meaning. And that's where the magic happens, and sometimes where the confusion begins. So, how do we bridge that gap? How do we move from knowing English to truly living English? Let's break it down. The first big step is understanding that real conversations are peppered with colloquialisms, idioms, and everyday expressions. Think about it. If someone tells you they're pulling your leg, they're not actually tugging on your limb, are they? They're teasing you. Or if something is a piece of cake, it has nothing to do with dessert. It means it's easy. These phrases are the secret sauce of natural conversation. They add color, express emotion, and often convey complex ideas succinctly. The challenge is, they often don't translate literally, which is why a direct dictionary lookup won't always help. So, how do you learn them? Immersion is key. Not just passive listening, but active engagement. When you hear an idiom, don't just ignore it. Jot it down, look it up, try to understand its context. And then here's the crucial part, try to use it. Start small. Maybe incorporate one new idiom into your self talk each day. Or try it out in a low stakes conversation with a trusted friend. The more you use them, the more natural they'll feel, and the more you'll start to recognize them automatically. Have you ever noticed how native speakers sometimes seem to swallow words or how sounds blend together? That's connected speech and reductions at play, and they're a huge part of real life English. We don't always say every word distinctly in rapid conversation. For instance, going to often becomes gonna, want to becomes wanna, and what are you doing can sound like what are you doing? These aren't bad English. They're natural shortcuts that make speech more efficient. And if you're not used to them, they can make listening feel incredibly challenging. Your brain is trying to process each word individually, but the speaker is blending them together. The best way to master this is through active listening and shadowing. Find podcasts, YouTube videos, or TV shows where people are speaking naturally, not formal news broadcasts, but real conversations. Listen carefully for these reductions, then try to mimic them. Shadow the speakers, repeating exactly what you hear, including their rhythm and the way they connect sounds. It feels a bit like singing at first, but it will train your ears to recognize these patterns and your mouth to produce them more naturally. Suddenly, those fast conversations won't sound like a jumble of noise anymore. They'll start to make sense. Think about how you typically greet someone or end a conversation. You might have learned, "Hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you." And while perfectly correct, it's not always how real people talk. In real life, greetings are much more varied and often more casual. "Hey, how's it going? What's up? Good to see you." And ending a conversation isn't just goodbye, it's catch you later. Have a good one. Talk soon. Take care. Learning these conversational openers and closers is vital for sounding natural and comfortable. They set the tone for the interaction. Pay attention to how people start and end conversations in the media you consume. Notice the context. Is it with a friend, a colleague, a stranger? And then try to incorporate them into your own practice. Again, start with self talk. Practice saying, "How's it going?" or "See ya" in front of a mirror until it feels less awkward. These small shifts make a huge difference in your perceived fluency and confidence. Here's something classroom English rarely teaches you: filler words and natural pauses. When we speak, we don't always have perfectly formed sentences ready to go. We hesitate, we think, we search for words, and in English, we use sounds and words like um, uh, like, you know, so, actually, to fill those brief silences. Now, I'm not saying you should start peppering every sentence with "like," but understanding their function is crucial. They give you a moment to think, and they make your speech sound more authentic, less robotic. If you always speak in perfectly constructed sentences without any natural pauses or fillers, it can sometimes sound a bit unnatural, almost rehearsed. How do you learn this? Again, observation. Listen to how native speakers pause and use these fillers, not just random ones, but the ones that fit the context. For example, you know, often indicates you're expecting the listener to understand something, so can introduce a summary or a conclusion, actually can correct or clarify. Practice incorporating a few natural pauses or appropriate fillers into your self talk. It's about sounding human, not just grammatically correct. This is perhaps the trickiest part of real life English: understanding nuance, tone, and implied meaning. Sometimes what someone says isn't exactly what they mean, or the meaning is conveyed more by how they say it rather than what they say. Sarcasm is a classic example. If someone says, "Oh, great job," after you've clearly messed something up, they probably mean the opposite. This level of understanding comes from a combination of cultural context, intonation, and observing body language. It's rarely taught in textbooks because it's so fluid and dependent on context. To improve here, immerse yourself in authentic English content where you can see facial expressions and hear vocal inflections. Watch comedies, dramas, and interviews. Pay attention not just to the words, but to the speaker's tone of voice, their facial expressions, and how others react to what they say. Try to guess the true meaning behind sarcastic remarks or subtle hints. It's like being a detective, picking up on all the clues that surround the words themselves. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you're unsure. Saying, "Are you being sarcastic?" is a perfectly valid way to learn. Finally, let's talk about ellipsis and short answers. In formal writing, we use full sentences. In real life conversation, we often shorten things dramatically. For example, instead of, "Are you going to the party tonight?" someone might just say, "Going to the party?" Or instead of, "Yes, I am going," they might just say, "Yeah," or "Definitely." We drop words that are understood from the context. This makes conversations flow faster and sound much more natural. Practice this by thinking about questions you might be asked. Instead of always giving a full, grammatically perfect answer, think about how a native speaker might respond briefly. If someone asks, "Coffee?" you don't need to say, "Yes, I would like some coffee." A simple "please" or "yeah, thanks" is perfectly natural. This not only makes you sound more fluent, but also makes your conversations more efficient and less stilted. So, how do you truly master this real life English? It comes down to a few core principles. Firstly, consistent observation. Be a language detective. Every time you hear or read something in English, especially informal English, pay attention. How are words shortened? What idioms are being used? How do people greet each other? Don't just consume, analyze. Secondly, active practice. Don't wait for a perfect opportunity. Create your own. Use self talk, record yourself, role play scenarios, try out new phrases, make mistakes. That's how you learn. The more you consciously try to use these elements of real life English, the more ingrained they'll become. Thirdly, patience and persistence. This isn't something you learn overnight. It's a continuous journey of immersion and experimentation. Celebrate the small victories. Every time you understand a new idiom, every time you use a natural sounding filler, every time you feel a conversation flow more easily. Remember, the goal isn't to perfectly imitate a native speaker. The goal is to feel confident, comfortable, and authentic when you communicate in English, wherever you are in the world. It's about breaking free from the confines of the textbook and embracing the vibrant, ever evolving language that people actually speak. If this resonated with you and you're ready to unlock more of that real life English, please give this video a big thumbs up. Share it with your language learning friends and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already.